Good evening.
Hello.
كيفك إلهام?
I'm good, alhamdulillah.
I'm
كيفك إلهام?
Alhamdulillah. Well, today you have a two Ilham session. One of a kind. Never happens. I can't remember any, or I can't recall any natural phenomenon that happened once every, I don't know, I don't know what their names are, but I'm sure this is like quite rare.
Special.
Yes, unique. Inspirational. Oh my God. We both said it at the same time. Play, that's amazing. Welcome everyone to Auditorium series. Today's episode is focused on sparking creativity and reigniting your passion. So, I want to talk about what reignites your passion and your creativity, and whenever you embark on a project or have a certain direction to go somewhere. But I can't help but be very curious about what what your background is. I mean, I don't want to say who you are in the traditional sense of the cliche, who you are, where did you study, what did you do, but if anyone who didn't know you were to ask you who you were, not who you are, what would you say?
Interesting, who I was.
Yes.
Well, I was somebody that was looking for my passion and something I could actually practice. So in between, I worked many different things. I did accounting, I did marketing, I did journalism, and everywhere I try to look for where that passion was in that specific job, just to feed my soul. And I grew up in a household that had artists around, so that helped a lot. That part, I think that is what ignited the initial spark, I guess.
Amazing. So you've had a career shift, I see.
A lot of career shifts.
Amazing.
Yeah, multiple.
So I would say you're multidisciplinary crazed, basically.
Yeah.
So you really want to do everything and one thing at the same time. How does that feel for you? Because I know a lot of creatives have that struggle, and we continuously talk about it in all our episodes because I'm always interested to hear from other people what they feel like. Do they connect to their multidisciplinary? Do you think it's a problem for you, or do you think actually it's a source of inspiration, or it's actually the tool where you spark your creativity and reignite your passion?
It's what feels natural, صراحة يعني. It's regardless of how we grow up, generally how society tells you that you're not supposed to be multidisciplinary. You're supposed to focus on your career. You're supposed to just have financial stability, which shifting between jobs or projects doesn't necessarily offer.
Yeah, it's like
but that's a learning curve of its own, where you learn by practice, firsthand, how important it is to have that financial stability. But it's your own way, like you carving your own path.
Right, exactly, and nobody sees that, especially I would say adults, because we're not really adults on the inside. We're still teenagers somewhere. We're really younger than we are supposed to.
I mean, that's a big part of these shifts.
Exactly.
It's that kid inside of you that wants to play, wants to be creative, and wants to not necessarily walk the same path that you're supposed to. That's carved out for you.
Exactly. You're supposed to be curious. You're supposed to find out, where do I go from here? What do I do? Why does everything have to be so systematic? And yeah, oh, I'm supposed to study like this. I'm supposed to work in my field, and I'm supposed to, or expected to, do specific things. And so I guess that's the creative revolutionary inside all of us. You want the thirst and curiosity to create something that's completely different, something that's new, and something that will open eyes on really your view of things. I've seen you are a writer. You've just launched a community platform on Instagram, Thuluthain. You exhibit your work, whether it's photography, painting, or sculpting at exhibitions. You actually specialize in research about art. And I see that most of your work talks about the background of it has a sense of not just Saudi culture, but how we lived in the past, decade or so, what we lived through. You take a lot of inspiration from the previous and you bring it from the past into the present and you move forward with it into the future. And I find that really interesting and inspiring because you've gone through a journey where you always like to reflect on the past to talk about the future.
Yeah.
And I want to know from you, because I've seen it, like, I wouldn't say chronologically, but I connected to it because I feel most of the work of your discussion specifically focuses on and concentrated on Saudi culture and women in specific. I've seen the, the work that you've done on that, the multidisciplinary work from one single concept. Can you please talk more about that? I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, sure. I guess where looking back on the past and kind of dwelling there and analyzing that to inform my work comes from, I think, right now when you ask it, I think it comes from the circumstances where I grew up in the States and then very far from family as a collective. It was just my close family. So for a long time, I felt, and my siblings too, growing up different places, you'd feel part of that community, right? So, and my parents would always remind us that no, you're Muslims, you're Arabs, you're Saudis, you're Muslims, it's different. So I think that struggle kept on as usual, and it's part of your identity crisis, which a lot of the time does seep through to your artwork. So I think that's something that always I reflected on because it was important for me to know who I am as an individual within a collective, and through that journey, as a kid and a teenager and early 20s, you're trying always to figure out who you are without losing the essence of how you are part of the social fabric. But what social fabric? Who am I? Am I from there or from here, or what is it exactly? So I think a lot of thinking about that and comparing between two different places, where I grew up and where I moved back to Riyadh. That was always in the back of my mind, or even very, very clear in my mind, visually, social behaviors, because when I did come back, we came back in the 90s, not very different time from it is today.
That was a great time to come back. That was fantastic.
It shaped us a lot.
Yeah.
So I think how difficult that time was, imprints has its imprint on everybody. Right?
Definitely, I would totally agree. If we hadn't gone through that time period, we wouldn't be who we are right now.
No, definitely not. And then having that ferment in my mind for years and years, and then when I decided to make the final shift, which is, I'm not going to say final shift, I might go back and forth against it, but this recent shift into art, I think it was a way for me, with all these changes in the country generally, and all the positivity, and me still kind of hung up on a lot of the past. I wanted to find a way to talk about that, or to
express it.
Express it in a way that isn't negative. وما في تباكي. The thing that I hate most in work is tobacco.
I completely
we did
agree.
that for a long time, even specifically during the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
In artwork, in adab, in shi'r, it was a part of it, and it was valid back then. But I wanted to move on. I didn't want to still be hung up in the past in that negative way, but to acknowledge that a big part of me will always be hung up in the past. But I wanted to recycle it in a way that made sense to me and made me actually feel not necessarily better, but healthier.
Yeah.
Mind, healthy for the mind and the soul. To find a way that you can bring the work, or I can bring the work and all the analysis that I've done in my mind and research in a more, not a positive way, but in a way that people can relate to without having them, when the work would shift you back to that time in the past, it will shed light on both the positive and negative, but still you would experience it in a like more wholesome way, and not just the negative.
Yeah, it's really enlightening, isn't it? When you use your pain to tell a story in a different way where you don't actually reflect your pain in the story.
But the thing is, sometimes when I like show artwork, for instance, like Nifa and the women, their stories, some people like teared up, but at the same time they would laugh like about the certain stories that, because it would remind them
A time.
of a time of their aunts or their mothers or like them as children.
Yeah.
So there is that like tinge of pain, but still it's a whole package. Like, it's not one or the other.
Exactly. And I think the more people connect, or the reason people connect to these stories is because they have backgrounds where they've gone through this, or they know someone that's gone through this, so they can automatically relate to it. So they do actually understand it. They can actually read it, and I think that's the most interesting thing. It's not just nostalgia. It's like storytelling, but in a different way. You were able to tell it in a creative way. Can you talk a little bit about that project so that people here who haven't seen it kind of get like a or heard about it can get a glimpse about it? Yeah.
Sculptures?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So Nifa is an artwork that is about Saudi women in the 80s and 90s for Riyadh, and how urban infrastructure, or how the like urbanism affected us, like how a space affects us and how we affect it and or change it in return, right? I think most of the people here know already, but yeah. That also like left an imprint on me because of how different like the outdoors, being a woman or a man or a child in the outdoors in Riyadh back in the 90s and 80s was a different thing. You had to carry yourself differently, or not like be in, there wasn't this kind of ecosystem. And when I noticed as a kid, and even when I remember, it was always linked to the infrastructure of the city and how it looks and how you can go around or not, how you can where you can move around freely, the flexibility of that. And most of our time as women was inside the houses. Rarely ever was it outside the house, unless it's like at somebody else's house. So I wanted to study how that affected these women specifically that were in their 20s and 30s, in the 80s and 90s for Riyadh, and how these high-rise walls and concrete spaces affected their body shape, affected their thinking, their souls. So I went back to some memories. I asked around, looked back at photo albums, and sculpted them. Ended up sculpting them like miniature sculptures of these women. They're mostly voluptuous women, and it's not a generalization, but it's a statement to make on how that small area that they're, even if the house was a big house as they were, it's still confined, and then they were all obligated to have almost a dozen of children, half a dozen at least. So that does affect their shape, but at the same time they were always moving. Like I remember very clearly, it was a very, very clear thing about these women. They were always strong women. They had like strong legs, their hands were strong. They're always working at home. So that gave them that strength and flexibility that we rarely ever have today, unless we're like going to the gym and paying money and that kind of thing. So I wanted to exhibit them in a way that kind of takes them out of that space physically, and how they like, and had motifs of the urban landscape and the windows of the staircases. And
do you think that had any impression on influencing your work or creating role models for you?
What do you mean by that?
That experience, the one you were just talking about, the memories you have that were very specific, do you think that has inspired you and influenced you in a way to become who you are today, to express yourself the way that you do today? Did it have like a major influence on you? Because I'm curious about where you got this influence.
Yeah, definitely. It did have a huge influence, because I was a very active kid. I did gymnastics, I played soccer. Coming back to this confined kind of space where you go, if you go out, you go to the zoo or Hadida Yimkin sometimes, but it's still that kind of confined area. There weren't walls, but there were these barriers because we're a very conservative community, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of left also a mark, or like cornered me to find out who I can be with all these restrictions.
Yes.
So it was always finding solutions.
Yeah.
It was always, and to find solutions, I'd analyze, like, why is this my situation?
Yeah.
What is it? Is it these walls? Is it the people? Is it the circumstance? And being young, it's very hard to find these answers, so they're always there, like thinking about them. So yeah, it did live, like it did have a huge impact.
Yeah, that is quite inspirational, because you think that it would drive you forward to, to influence you later on, for you to become this.
I mean, I hated it back then, of course. It was negative. I never thought this would ever be something positive or turned into an art work.
Exactly. But see,
but it like explodes.
Because you are who you are. You took that thing and you transformed it completely. Yeah. You took the positive thing from it and you just kind of like said, hey, I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to tell them through art. I'm going to tell them through research. I'm going to tell them through, community projects. I'm going to tell them in different ways, because, I think that's what's important at the end of the day. You take what you have and you try to motivate yourself, and you reignite your passion and your interests, so that you can regularly remind yourself of, why am I doing this? Because in the creative process, people tend to get so bogged down with this, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I've lost track. I don't know why I'm doing this. And then you kind of find yourself in some sort of manner thinking, I know, like something that reminds you, like, I know you see the small thing, or you read something that kind of is like, oh, I know, that's why I wanted to do this. And then you pick yourself up and you just kind of get really excited and you say, okay, this is why I'm doing this. So I'm going to stick to this. And this is the way I see it, the way I understood it. I think I kind of connected with you as well at some points. And I understand we have a lot of common grounds with other creatives as well, because this is how you work. You always draw inspiration from something previous, and it's up to you to be conscious enough to kind of like pull that out of you and just, drive it somewhere. It's always up to you, and that's something we should all, I guess, remember always, that this is, in order to be motivated and understand how to move forward. What do I want to do? What am I?
Like, I didn't wake up one day and it was like, oh, let me do something about these women. It was an idea that was in my mind for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that it was going to be an artwork. Yeah. It was like beginning of these amazing changes, Sordia and everything. But then I also saw that my aunts and my older aunts and my mother, and generally women that are like past 40 or 50 or 60, it's different for them. They've lived in a certain time for Sordia, and it was difficult for them. It's a whole new scene for them. So I just started thinking about their time when they were younger. If they were younger today, were they going to be different towards these? Were they going to be like out in public and enjoying their time? So I think I brought that up like while I was at work somewhere, like I was working, and I brought it up to one of the employees to find a solution, because that was like what we did. And he wasn't from Sordia, so he was like, oh, that's something that it seems like you're very passionate about, so that's your thing. You find a solution for it. And I didn't like what he said, because I thought like, okay, let's find a solution together and fix this. So that stayed in my mind for 3 years. Like, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? And because it was a heavy subject, because it's very personal to me, I couldn't do something from the start. It was very intimidating, because I did have to go very deep into my own self and my own memories and my own pain and hopes and dreams lost or whatever, and try to reimagine that, and do good by these women that have amazing history in that point of time, where they were like uprooted from rural towns to Riyadh post-oil boom, into these big cities, and this huge change, and that different time, like mentally, spiritually, religiously, they were trying to figure out who they were at that time, but they were also obligated to raise families. So that was a previous like critical shift to Saudi, like as it is today, and they kind of traded their dreams and hopes and whoever they wanted to be for this responsibility. they didn't have a choice, and it made us today who we are, people that are, you know, driving the change and everything. So like it always was in my mind.
You seem to be very perseverant in your journey. You don't stop. You always go. You find something or the other that drives your passion. What do you do, or where do you draw inspiration, or when you want to find that something to spark what you want to do? What do you do? Is there like a ritual or something? Do you have a specific way of doing it, or is it just something that, you know, it's named after you? Just you're just naturally inspired to do everything.
No, I think just recently I found out like certain things I can do to reignite that. Whereas before it was like creative block, right? Artistic block, خلاص. Oh, we'll wait for the inspiration to come. But sometimes it's as simple as changing scenery, going out for a walk, petit Q, wherever, something like nature, being around sunlit areas. That is a lot, like Nifam, I can't Nifam. Sometimes it's more extensive. I'll go and read, which is becoming more and more difficult for us today to read. So I'll read, and that would ignite a spark. That would remind me of something. That would I would find maybe a new idea. Writing sometimes helps. Talking to friends, talking to people about certain subjects, bouncing ideas off. It's not like one thing or another for me. It's not like a formula I do or a ritual, specific ritual.
Yeah.
Moving around, doing like actual exercise, getting myself out of the rut and trying to find ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know. What sparks, like what brought on Thiruthain? I feel like it's different from your direction, different from what you've been doing, and then all of a sudden this Thiruthain surfaces everywhere, and what is this? Wow, this is really cool. What is this about? So I'm just curious, what sparked that?
Yeah. Well, Thiruthain came after my own isolation, and then also COVID. So I was pretty much in my own bubble, which was great for my art, but not for long. Like, it's not a sustainable way to live. And I do enjoy being around people. Like times when I'd be on the job and then resign to do my own thing or freelance, I'd always miss that. Sometimes I go and work at cafes just to have people always around. They'll become my friends and colleagues. So Thuluthan in a big part was to find that community and get myself out of that bubble and commit to it.
Okay.
Like if you have something, you're coming out and saying, so we're gonna talk about this and that. This is Thuluthan, a community. You're gonna have to be tied to it. You're gonna have to put your money where your mouth is.
Why Thuluthan though?
So I wanted to commit, but I didn't want to overwork myself, so it was. I didn't want it to be every week, so it was every other week. And I was like, what is the best day of the week to have this? Midweek maybe. What is easier to say? I can't say ahadain, ithnain. It's very heavy. Like Thuluthan is easier, so Thuluthan. That's what Thuluthan.
Oh damn! I thought. Oh my god! I thought you were talking about ratio.
Thuluthan. No.
It's like a
It's not like yours.
2/3 or 2/3 or something. Oh, did you just advertise our program? Okay, the guys, we have the Funders and Founders program. It's really useful for you guys. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, but also like Thuluthan came from my interest in critique and the lack of critique in creative fields, but specifically in art. So it was about getting together and talking to people that are also in the same place that I am. You want to meet other people in the arts and creative world,
yeah.
But not specifically in the hottest hub happening. Like sometimes you just want to meet and have quality time with other creatives, strangers.
Right.
So that's how the movie community came about. So it was in different places because Riyadh is super big. So it is very possible to even have criteria about people living in Shamal, which Sharq al-Gharb is always different.
Right.
And that would inform their practices, whatever creative field they're in. So moving community would make it easier for us to meet without them having to get out of their bubble too much and travel through like across the Riyadh to
Yeah.
be somewhere.
You mentioned criticism.
Mhm.
How does the lack of art criticism affect elevating one's creative journey?
Well, specifically in a time where art is flourishing, creative fields are flourishing, we're all very super excited. It's very easy to lose track of the message you want to send, or even having certain infrastructure for certain fields, your own
Growth path?
your own growth path, exactly where you're headed, just to have that reminder.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like, I understand, like specifically after speaking about this and talking about it and writing about it, and hearing feedback from people or having talks. I'm very aware that art criticism for Saudiya does not have to be art criticism as it is in Europe or the States. It's a different time, it's a different landscape, it's a different community. It can be tailored to us, it can be something completely new, but still it has to have that critical thinking. Like people all the time, like كثير لما أقول نقد مين تبغى تنقدين؟ مين تبغى تجلدين؟ أنت زعلان على مين؟
Who do you want to fight with?
You want to pick a fight with, yeah. So it's also about educating people, but also educating myself on how to approach this.
Definitely. I actually believe that my mentor, while I was studying interior design and architecture, and I don't think I realized she was my mentor at the time, and I don't think she even realized I perceived her as my mentor. She would always say, you need to have a critical eye. Not because someone said Philippe Starck is the best designer or a great designer, you would have to say, yeah, no, you could say no.
Yeah.
Like you have eyes, you have understanding, you have a brain, you can actually look at something and say, no, I don't agree with that. That for reasons A, B, C, not just because you want to be opinionated, but you need to have a critical eye. And I think critical eye doesn't mean that I criticize the person.
Yeah.
But I'm not criticizing the person, I'm just saying the work that's being done. I'm criticizing it technically. Giving and receiving feedback has to be a thing that people need to build on, need to understand. You have to be elegant in how you criticize something and you say, what حتى criticize, it's called giving feedback.
Like even like
giving,
analyzing, like I notice in it doesn't, as you said, it doesn't have to be critique as much as it is analyzing an artist's journey or analyzing the landscape or the infrastructure in a certain creative field for Saudiya, analyzing it and writing about it and finding what it lacks,
right.
what are the good parts and what are the bad parts and how to move on from there. It's just like you keep on like constant rechecking, like having checking up on yourself or checking up on the community where it doesn't have to be harsh and just pointing out the bad parts or this is not a great artist. No, it's not.
Did you receive like negative criticism on your work? Like, did you suffer from that and that's why you feel like it should be worked on? Is it the lack of professionalism in giving the critic?
There are some like artists that are like older artists and professional artists that would come and just want to gauge like how other younger artists maybe or new artists to the scene.
The more traditional ones.
The more traditional ones, they love to play this game. They'll come in exhibitions and they'll say something almost almost negative, like about your work, just to poke you and see what your reaction is. But I don't think that affected me because I feel like I've already built myself through my career. I've already had like thick skin. If I were younger, yeah, definitely that would have affected me.
But then you have to also think about it. The time where they were creating artwork and wanted to be recognized, no one recognized them.
See,
and then suddenly they go out into the art scene,
yeah.
and then they find all these people, and they're like, "What?
Yeah.
This guy? That woman? What is this expression? What is this work? I never got recognized for this, and everyone's getting recognized for it. Even it's not even coming from a place of professionalism. It's probably like, what did you call it? Tobacco?
Tobacco.
That. Definitely that.
Like they're projecting their own pain on.
Definitely, because it's only like normal.
I guess so. See, it's very hard. Yani, for Saudiya specifically, this is why we need to write more. just to understand ourselves and find out why are we behaving like this in a field that is supposed to be more, and it's like this everywhere, like globally. But like we have the chance to actually build a positive infrastructure.
Exactly.
Writing is a big part of it in all fields, not just arts. So having this and writing about it, people would understand and know. It doesn't mean that it's valid 100%. You don't have to agree with it, but it just shows you a backstory. As critique shows you the backstory of an art show or an artist, or like it tells you why they did that. It doesn't have to tell you like the shading wasn't right or the dimensions weren't right.
Definitely.
It's about like why are they like this?
Definitely.
What is it about the artist? How did they live? It tells you about like the social aspect of when they grew up, when like the social aspect of what it is as they did the artwork and exhibited it financially, economically, politically, everything. It talks about like it's a critique is more about the evolution of communities and societies more than it is just about the art and artists. Art is like a mirror.
Exactly, because the work is an expression of current times or romanticizing other times. You know, what else could it be? So I really don't want this conversation to end. So I'm really happy talking to you and listening to see what you have to say. I'm trying to really avoid cliche questions like what's your next work. I'll ask you something else though.
Okay.
Maybe we can write a piece together or something.
Yes, for
about what we just mentioned right now. Because like you were talking about the critique and the jealousy of the other generations towards this generation, and how we're stuck in the middle between the older ones and the newer ones in the social context. I think
maybe it's our job to be mediators. I mean, there's whole communities that are still in bubbles.
Yeah.
Like Jamal Musa, Raja Musa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Alam Thania, Alam Tashkili, like the paintings,
Yeah.
they're doing their own thing, but it's not connecting. And it should, because it's going to inform both of us. We're all part of, but there's so much like resentment or maybe.
I think it's a time to reignite and revive this kind of like creating a new style, like a new style of communication, a new style of art, a new style of, I don't know, anything. It's something to say, because if looking back, like if you look at like Art Nouveau, where did Art Nouveau as a style come from? It came from everybody was so sick and tired of the mass industry producing and replicating everything that was expensive to become something very cheap and available to everyone. They're like, oh, this machine-made stuff just is making us really angry. We want to go back to making things with our hands, like wallpaper, patterns, forging iron, fer forger, and all those things. Okay, so I'm going to make another style, and then all these styles are, you know, basically just a dialogue of the socio-political, economical factors that are, you know. So maybe we should make our own reference of that and see how we can reignite the treasure of our past and really what matters in the past and bring it forward to the future with a different perspective, with a different reflection.
And I think that's what's happening today.
Yes.
Because there is this recognition of the importance of this industry that we've lacked for a long time.
Yeah.
Whether it's critique or writing about art, like recording and documenting the history of art for Saudi.
Yeah.
And you see initiatives happening and institutions and residencies and grants up specifically to that point.
Yes, but are they focused on what we are, or are they focused on what they want us to be?
I mean, that's where our role comes in.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And I think that's a great way to I don't want to say end the discussion. This is a great way to start another discussion, another dialogue, and another project together, if you will. This was really one of, I don't want all the other people I spoke to be jealous. This is like the best discussion. I think I'm just biased because, you know, like we share the same names. I don't know for sure. I want to ask the audience and our viewers on Instagram Live if you guys have any questions that you want to ask. No? No questions? Suggestions? feedback. Okay, show us some love. No?
What's the favorite project you've worked on so far?
The favorite project I worked on? That's difficult. Wow. That is like that. I'm gonna say the cliche thing. They're all my babies, but the most interesting you said or fun. It's hard.
The one you enjoyed most creating?
I enjoyed Sababat a lot. Like it was both intimidating and difficult, but I enjoyed every part of it. I enjoyed working with the women. I think it's because it's a project where I worked with people directly, whereas maybe Nifa, I went back to photo albums, my own memories, also speaking to family members. But then Sababat was something that I thought about since I was 12, and I wanted to do something about it, and eventually I did. So I think that's I think it has a special place in my heart.
Okay. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you Elham for giving us this rare opportunity to delve into see what you're doing and what you're about. This was really interesting and very inspiring.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And
We'll continue
yes, definitely we'll continue this this dialogue and we'll do some more amazing things together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Elham.